Thank you and good morning to everyone. My name is Laszlo, and as said, I would like to introduce to you the Integrom Program. And the first thought when I've seen the allocation of people to the panels was that I'm actually in a very difficult situation, not just because I'm in between two great presenters, but also because in my study or in my paper, we talk by far about the smallest numbers. I'm in between South Africa and Philippines. Of course, Hungary is a small country, so the impact is not as huge. So I try to do my best to explain to you or tell to you why I think this initiative is as important as I believe it is. So let me introduce first a guy called Kafu. Actually, his nickname and the real name is Richard. This guy is a Roma living in the countryside in Hungary. And he was studying at the college IT, but actually for financial reasons he had to stop these studies. And then he had serious difficulties to find a good job, and he was unemployed for many years actually. Then he was joining our program, the Integrom Program, and he was going through the training, offering what we are providing the candidates. And he was interviewed by a couple of the companies who are participating in the program. And then he got a job with one of the major banks in Hungary in the IT department. And since he joined the bank, he was awarded for his great performance. He was promoted even, and his salary was doubled. So I think it's very clear that the Integrom program actually changed the life of this guy. Let me also introduce to you a lady called Melinda. She is a Roma living in around Oz, which is a small city in a very rural and poor region in Hungary. She is a mother of two kids, and she was working as a sewer. And for her, education was always very important. So she was doing actually correspondence studies at college. But she had serious financial troubles to really, maintain the family and maintain herself and the two kids. So basically, she was joining the Integrom program, and she got an interview with the leading telecom company in Hungary, and then she got the job offer to work in the customer service area. She moved to Budapest in 2 weeks' time. The kids got to a school in Budapest, and the company even helped her to find a temporary housing solution until she finds a final one. So I think we can also say that the life of Melinda changed completely thanks to this program. So who are these people, and then what is this program which actually changed their lives? To understand the context of this, you have to know that in Hungary we have roughly 800,000, 750,000 Roma people living, which is the biggest minority in the country. And actually the Roma people, if I also add like the other countries in the region like Romania or Slovakia or Bulgaria or the ex-Yugoslavia, it's a couple of millions actually. So it's a big population. These people are living in these countries for hundreds of years. So it's not a new phenomenon. They are living there at least from the Middle Ages. And so far they didn't really manage to integrate into the societies. Now, you can see that roughly we assume, there is no real reliable statistics, but we estimate that roughly only 20% of the active aged Roma people in Hungary are actually working in, let's say, normal jobs. The 80% of them are either unemployed, or they are at home with the family and the kids, or they are participating in some state-organized temporary jobs, or they are working on the black market. They don't have real jobs typically. More than that, there are no Roma people in the corporate positions in Hungary. There are no Roma controllers, no Roma finance managers, no Roma purchasing experts, no Roma IT experts, and so on. So they are clearly excluded from the so-called normal corporate universe in Hungary. And there are many initiatives which are helping the Roma people in Hungary overall, but these are typically focusing on subsidies sometimes on education, but not really on employment, or not at least at employment in these sectors. So what we thought as a local social impact initiative of BCG to try to make this link between the Roma population and the corporate sector. Of course, BCG is working a lot with the corporate sector in Hungary, so we thought we can maybe help to do something here. And this is the program we launched in the beginning of 2014, so last year. How we imagine the impact of this program? I think there are 3 layers of this impact. The first obvious layer is on the individuals, on the people like Melinda or Cafu, whom I introduced to you, who can get a job through this program, and therefore we believe can become also role models for the Roma society. The second layer is the impact on the companies with which we are working together. It's really amazing to observe like what is the level of mindset change of the people who are working in these companies when they are really faced with the situation, with the issues, but also with the beauty of working together with people who are having a completely different background. That's very important layer also, like this cultural change in case of the participating companies. And the third one, of course, will be the most important, that we would like to actually achieve a situation in Hungary where it will become absolutely normal and typical and no surprise that Roma people do have corporate positions. Middle layers, also later in the management. They should have equal share in these positions like their share is in the society. This is a long journey. We discussed with some of the colleagues here that it's a long journey. Our program is a small step in that, but this is the overarching vision. Now, how is this program structured? So we have, this is a multi-stakeholder program. We have 3 types of participants or cooperating partners. One is, of course, the corporate companies who are participating. I mean, these names probably don't say anything to you, but these are the leading companies in Hungary in banking, in energy, in production, in different telecommunication, different areas. Different industries, but also companies who are in their own industry competing with each other normally. Very important. There are many banks, for example, who are normally competing with each other, but in this program they are cooperating. What they do, they contribute to the program with the jobs, of course, but also from every company we have a few persons, typically from the HR or from the CSR kind of areas, who are very enthusiastic, very passionate about the program, and they are really contributing to develop it further and to really make it happen. Then we have a bunch of professional service provider companies, like a legal firm, like HR company, like training company, who are again the leading names of their own industry, typically with a quite high price point. But in this program, they are all of them contributing on a voluntary basis, free of charge. They are providing, obviously, services to the program which are necessarily relevant. And then we have the recruitment partners, as we call. These are civil organizations, typically, who are dealing with Roma people. And why we need them is that we, as BCG, do not have a channel which we can use to access the target population. And we are working with these foundations because they do have channel to these guys. And we are basically signing up the participants with the help of these kind of intermediaries. And then in the middle, we have our company which was launching this program and which is working on developing it further, and Autonomia Foundation, which is bringing to the game 25 years of experience with all kind of issues around the Roma population. Very quickly, what are the steps? It's very obvious, not surprising. We are basically trying to connect demand and supply, connect applicants and companies. We are training the participants with hard skills and soft skills. We are supporting them in the application process. We are mentoring them, or not we are mentoring, but we are organizing mentorship for them once they have the new job in the company. And then, of course, we are evaluating and taking the conclusions out of every single case to really develop the program further. Now, just a few pictures. This is a completely volunteer effort. So, colleagues of BCG, colleagues of the companies which I mentioned, colleagues from the professional service companies, do sacrifice their weekends to actually work on this program. And then you can see from the pictures that this is really a special kind of experience for them also to meet these guys, meet the target, the candidates, and then basically understand what is in their minds and what is driving their behaviors and decisions. Couple of numbers I mentioned before, it's not huge numbers. We had so far 5 training cycles, quarterly training cycles. These are training weekends as we call them, but basically it's almost a week-long training cycles. We had 135 applicants to these training programs. We had 73 whom we selected and participated in this. We had 52 interviews with these companies, and we placed 10 people. So there are 10 people like Cafu or Melinda who basically found a new kind of life thanks to the program. 2 comments to that. First of all, we are very proud of these numbers because I think even if we manage to change the life of one person, I think it's a big kind of step forward. On the other hand, we know that these numbers are small. So the big question is how to scale up this program, how to make it even more meaningful. And the way how we imagine that is that we would like to make sure that they are not tens of candidates placed every year, but hundreds of candidates. So therefore, we have to kind of increase the access to the Roma people, not only through the foundations, but also in social media and from different kind of sources. We want to increase the number of corporates participating in this, at least to 40. We probably have to institutionalize the program. We have to have a legal entity. We have to have some funding. However, I have to say that the program is very low cost. So basically, we just spend on transportation. We just spend on some kind of catering or food to the participants and some rent fees. So very low cost. And then I think we want to keep up the system of fully engaged volunteers. That will not change. I think the number of people will increase, but this volunteer logic will not change because that's somehow the spirit of this program. And finally, just the last page, why do we believe that this program can actually offer something to other similar programs which are in similar fields? There are 6 reasons for it. First of all, it is focusing on a disadvantaged target group, and unfortunately in today's world we have many of them in all geographies. Second, this is not a philanthropic program. This is rooted in existing needs and demands of the corporate sector. And that's why we believe that it can be a sustainable one, because we are trying to solve an issue which is in the economy, basically finding labor force which is desperately needed by the corporates. Third one, it's a coalition of trusted partners. It's not easy in the everyday operation because there are some different views always, but this is making it, I think, stable. Fourth is bridge building. In the frame of this program, basically, people are meeting each other whom never would meet otherwise. Like the HR manager of a telecom company in Budapest would never meet Cafu or Melinda in their normal lives without the program. Voluntary cooperation, very clear. Everybody is contributing with his own assets in a very voluntary way and in a passionate way. And finally, very important, might change, but so far there is absolutely no link to government, no link to any kind of political considerations in this program. But I'm saying it might change that potentially, when we want to scale it up, we should think about some kind of relationship and some kind of cooperation with the state might be necessary, but it will remain completely free of politics. That's for sure. So that's the program, and as said, the vision behind is that we would like to achieve that a couple of years or a couple of decades down the road, it will be completely normal that these guys are involved in the corporate lives in Hungary, and they will have equal share in these positions to their share in the society. Thank you very much.
Well, I think you can see that both these projects are innovative and represent a valuable partnership between corporates and civil society organisations, largely compensating, I think, for state failures. It's also very clear that only a relatively small number of people have been helped in both countries. And if you were a cynic, you'd say that these are drops of optimism in an ocean of misery. Now, I think you would be wrong to reach that conclusion. I think you have to start somewhere, and the demonstration effect of these projects is absolutely critical because they demonstrate that a better world or a better outcome is possible. And the cooperation that exists between corporates and the third sector is also critical to the success of these programs. But I want to return again to the role that isn't being played by the state here. As Anthony pointed out to you, there is a limited amount of funding available from the South African government for Harambee, but it's relatively small. And you really have to ask yourself whether it's possible for these programs to be scaled up in an appropriate way to make a big impact on the huge problems that both the Roma in Hungary and young black workers in South Africa experience without a partnership between civil society, corporates and government. Government is the missing piece of the puzzle. Thinking for a moment about the Harambee example, Anthony talked about the impact of labour market regulation on employment opportunities in South Africa, suggesting that both minimum wages and unfair dismissal rules are not employment enhancing. Now, if you want to do something about that, the only way you can do it is by changing public policy. I would say, by the way, that it's worth recalling the World Bank's report on jobs published in 2013, which suggested that all countries, developed, emerging markets, undeveloped, are operating on a regulatory plateau, and that the critical thing is not to get too close to the edge, either over-regulating or under-regulating. Over-regulating, you get lots of unemployment. Under-regulating, you get lots of exploitation. So how do you achieve a more judicious mix in South Africa unless the state is involved in that process? I think it's also important to understand that in developed countries, and certainly in Northern Europe and specifically in the Nordics, programs of this kind to integrate the most excluded would be run by the Public Employment Service in partnership with civil society organisations and corporations. And the focus would be not just on activating people to look for a job or to find a job, but to support people into work and enable them to build their capacities once they had returned to employment. Again, returning to Amartya Sen's capabilities perspective. That's true even in my own country, where before the crash, the UK's active labour market programmes were designed specifically in partnership with corporates so that corporations agreed to take a certain number of people from what was then called the government's New Deal into employment for at least a year. One of the real questions for me about both Hungary and South Africa is how can you promote labour market inclusion when so many other powerful factors are pulling in the opposite direction? And how can you move some of those other factors in a more inclusive rather than exclusive direction? Now, this is an ambitious agenda, but it seems to me that if we're serious about labour market inclusion, we need to think about the school's education system for all the reasons that were identified in Anthony's presentation. It's also true, Laszlo, from your presentation, the Roma generally have very low levels of education attainment that exclude them from the labour market. So what can you do to make the education system serve the interests of the most disadvantaged? What can you do about the vocational training system to ensure that you have a bunch of young people who have a strong sense of occupational identity and valuable skills at the point they enter the labour market? What can you do about lifelong learning to ensure that people retain the capabilities they need to remain in work? What can be done inside the workplace to create opportunities for progression and advancement? What can be done to eliminate unnecessary inequalities that exist in the workplace? And so far as the Roma are concerned, it's critical, for example, that direct employer discrimination has to be dealt with because it's clearly there. What can be done inside the workplace? I've talked about the role of the state extensively, and I won't spend too much time on that, but the design of the social security system, the design of the unemployment insurance system, the level of replacement rates, the nature of active labour market programmes, the extent to which they're focused on activation and building human capital is absolutely critical here. And finally, I would say, looking beyond the state, we need to reflect on the role of institutions. In Europe, that would include trade unions and works councils. I think I'll stop there. I would only conclude by saying that I think both projects are great. I was one of the jurors that selected them. They wouldn't be great. They wouldn't be here if they weren't great. I think they demonstrate that a better world is possible, but in and of themselves, they are not sufficient. Thank you very much.